تحيتهم يوم يلقونه سلام وأعد لهم أجرا كريما.
When a will is written down and it conforms with the dictates of the Sharia, no one is allowed to change anything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given a firm instruction with regard to this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, after mentioning the instruction regarding the inheritance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah An-Nisa, from verse 12 to 14, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Wasiyyah min Allah. This is an instruction from Allah. Wallahu alimun halim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alimun, is all-knowing and most forbearing. Allah now said, Tilka hududullahi. These are the limits stipulated by Allah. وَمَنْ يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ يُدْخِلُهُ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا وَذَلِكَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whosoever obeys Allah and His Messenger will be admitted into Al-Jannah, under which rivers flows, and he is going to abide therein forever, and that will be the supreme success. Allah says, وَمَنْ يَعْصِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَيَتَعَدَّ حُدُودَهُ يُدْخِلْهُ النَّارَ خَالِدًا فِيهَا وَلَهُ عَذَابٌ مُهِينٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, but anyone who disobeys Allah and His Messenger and transgresses His limits, so which means that redistributing what Allah has distributed, or cheating in the wasiyyah, in the will written down by a deceased, then is transgressing the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah also mentioned the consequence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, يُدْخِلُهُ النَّارَ. Allah will admit such a person to hellfire. خَالِدًا فِيهَا. He is going to abide therein forever. وَلَهُ عَذَابٌ مُهِينٌ. And for him will be a disgraceful punishment, a disgraceful torment in hellfire. So which means that it is a major sin for somebody to alter the will, to alter the distribution that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did. So it is not a small matter. The way we handle inheritance with levity, and we look at it as if it is a booty, especially for those who do not have any rights to it, claiming it because they have some kind of, they're in a position to be able to do that. Doing that is a major sin that has the threat of admittance into hellfire. May Allah protect us. So, in Islam, inheritance has three pillars. There are three pillars of inheritance. For inheritance to be accomplished, there are three pillars. When any one of those three pillars is missing, then inheritance cannot happen. The first one is al-mawruth, is the estate, which means what a deceased left behind to be inherited by his legal heirs. So this is the estate. And in Islam, the estate can be tangible wealth, such as money or building and the likes. It could also be intangible wealth, such as copyrights, patents. However, whatever the wealth that is left behind must be free from haram. That is, a wealth cannot be inherited if it is haram, such as intoxicant. If an individual left a warehouse full of alcohol or intoxicant and he died, his legal heirs cannot inherit this alcohol. Why? Because in Islam, inheritance or the estate, intoxicant or haram wealth cannot qualify as a rightful estates in Islam. So this is the rule of the Sharia concerning that. So with regard to the estates, before it can be available for inheritance, there are four important rights that are supposed to be taken care of first. The first one is the funeral expenses of the deceased. The funeral expenses of the deceased is to be taken from whatever the deceased left behind, which is part of his estate. However, if someone else undertakes to pay for the funeral expenses from his own money, aside from the property of the deceased, this is allowed. So in that case, nothing is taken from the property of the deceased. So this is the first right that is due upon the estate, that is whatever is left behind by a deceased. The second thing, which is a right on the property of the deceased, is the repayment of loan, especially loan that have collaterals. So part of the property of the deceased has been given to the creditor as collateral. So in this regard, the first kind of loan that is repaid from the property of the deceased is any loan which the deceased has given part of his property as collaterals to be paid. That is the first one. Then the third one is any other kind of loan that the person who died may owe others. It could be financial, it could be spiritual, but it does not have any collateral, like the one that we mentioned before. For instance, it could be spiritual in the sense that it could be something that the deceased had vowed to do for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For instance, if the deceased during his lifetime had made a vow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that if he were to do such and such for him, he will go for Hajj. And it happened that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, answered his prayer and he got what he wanted, but he did not fulfill his vow before he died. So in this regard, the heirs are required to take the money for performing Hajj, somebody who's going to perform Hajj on his behalf, to take the money from his estate and to sponsor somebody to go for Hajj on his behalf. So this is a spiritual debt on the neck of the deceased. So this is also something that has to be taken from the estate of the deceased before it is distributed. The fourth rights due upon the estate is Wasiyyah, that is bequest. It is allowed for an individual who knows that he will soon die, or there's a possibility of his death, and he has written his Wasiyyah, and he has somebody who is not a legal heir, who he wants to benefit with any part of his property. This is allowed in the Sharia. We have already mentioned that before. To make it clearer, there's something that they call hajbu in the Sharia with regard to inheritance. And this is a situation where the presence of one heir prevents another possible heir from inheriting. For instance, when there is a male child, if a male child succeeds a deceased, then that male child, even if it is one, and even if the child is a day old, at the time of the death of his father, that male child blocks the brothers of the deceased from inheriting. But if a man knows that, okay, I have male children, that if my property were to be distributed according to the Islamic law, my brother will not get anything from my estate. So he can write in his will instructing that such and such part of his property should be given to his brother, just such as an example. So in this case, that instruction as long as it does not exceed 1/3 of the entire estate, it's a valid instruction. So before the estate is inherited, this kind of bequest, this kind of will is executed. So that part of the property that he has the deceased has willed to his brother, is taken out of the estate. Whatever remains is what is inherited. So this is the first pillar of inheritance in Islam.